Sit tight, kiddos. This is going to be a long one. Today we're going to talk about SNK's fighting game series. Now, of course, the biggest of these, and the one you're probably the most familiar with, would be the King of Fighters. The King of Fighters series is pretty damn confusing unless you're someone who's followed it from its inception, and even then there's plenty of reasons to get tripped up. The numbering is odd, as it switched from using years in the titles to Roman numerals, but there are spin-off games that confuse the mess. It's also a difficult series to collect, as until the last few they were all made for the Neo Geo system, and unless you wanted to spend hundreds of dollars per game, you had to settle for ports, which were inconsistent at best. What makes the King of Fighters interesting, though, is that the entire series itself is sort of a spin-off. While Capcom is the name that most people associate with fighting games, back in the 90s, SNK was a close second, with games such as Fatal Fury, Art of Fighting, World Heroes, and Samurai Shodown. The King of Fighters is a crossover series between the two biggest of the fighting franchises, Art of Fighting and Fatal Fury, which started sort of unofficially when an Art of Fighting character, Ryo, appeared in a Fatal Fury game. While these series would continue on their own as SNK's serious games, the King of Fighters was pure fan service, a series of dream match games using characters from all over SNK properties, even characters that debuted outside of the fighting genre. But while these series have sort of waned, King of Fighters got bigger and bigger and became the main SNK fighting series with its own storyline. Now, since I don't want to do separate episodes for them, even though they have not officially crossed into King of Fighters, I'm going to start by covering the lesser two series, World Heroes and Samurai Shodown. World Heroes is unique in that it was developed mostly by the Alpha Denshi Corporation, although they received assistance from SNK. World Heroes is kind of like Eternal Champions, only it's good. The storyline involves various figures from throughout history coming together to fight in a tournament to decide who is best suited to fight the last boss. What makes World Heroes sort of unique is that the characters are clearly based off of well-known historical figures such as Rasputin, Joan of Arc, and Bruce Lee. It was originally released for the Neo Geo MVS, which was their arcade system, and also came out for the AES, which was the home version of the hardware. Then the Neo Geo CD add-on, which offered better music, but that version only came out in Japan. It was later brought to the Super NES and Genesis, and was planned for Sega CD, but that never happened. The original version showed up as the unlockable secret game in SNK Arcade Classics Volume 1 for PlayStation 2, PSP, and Wii, and it's available on its own for the Wii's Virtual Console. The sequel, World Heroes 2, came out next and introduced a gaggle of new characters and modes, but was pretty much almost the same game, just polished up a bit. After being on the Neo Geo, it was brought to the Neo Geo CD with better music, but only in Japan, just like the first game. Unfortunately, it wasn't as available as the first game on more conventional consoles. The Super NES eventually did get a version of it, but the Genesis did not. It showed up on the Turbo Duo, but only in Japan. It's also on the Wii Virtual Console, however, unlike the original, it was only released in Japan. The next release was kinda weird. Less than a year later, they released World Heroes 2 Jet. This would suggest just an updated version of World Heroes 2, but story-wise, it's considered a sequel and contains a lot of new mechanics and features. This version came out for Neo Geo and the CD add-on, though of course the CD version was a Japanese exclusive. It never showed up on the Super NES or Genesis, though oddly there was a version for the Game Boy with a different art style. The last game in the World Heroes series is World Heroes Perfect, which is in a lot of ways a accumulation of the entire series. After the Neo Geo MVS and AES versions, it was released for the Neo Geo CD, and the only game in the series to be released in America for the add-on. It showed up on the Saturn, but only in Japan. Oddly enough, the Japanese also got it for the Wii's Virtual Console, even though World Heroes 2 Jet had not been released there. Thankfully, if you want the entire series, it's rather easy. In Japan, there's World Heroes Gorgeous Neo Geo Online Collection Volume 2 for PlayStation 2, which includes all of the games in the series. It eventually was released in America, where it was rebranded as World Heroes Anthology. Okay, on to Samurai Shodown. Samurai Shodown is a darker, more violent fighter than most SNK games, featuring weapons and spurts of blood, as well as a serious storyline set in the 18th century. Like World Heroes, they were all released for Neo Geo, and it can be difficult to track them all down for other consoles. though like World Heroes you can get almost the entire series in a collection. Samurai Shodown also had some spin-offs of its own. One thing that is really interesting is the title. The word Showdown is seemingly purposefully misspelled. The reason behind this I could never get a definitive answer on. It could be a case of bad romanization. However, in Japan, the series is known as Samurai Spirits, so I don't think it's that. Oh well. Samurai Shodown was a huge hit on the Neo Geo. I remember playing the hell out of the MVS version back in the day, but unfortunately, most of the ports had dumbed-down graphics, toned-down violence, missing characters, and other issues. The Sega Genesis version is very turned down in terms of graphics and is missing the largest character, Earthquake. The Super NES version has more characters, but it doesn't fare much better on the graphical side, though it is closer in terms of the colors. The game played slower. It's just interesting how they both handle the limitations. For example, the Genesis version had better sound, but is missing many of the sound effects and most of the voice effects. The Super NES version had all of the sounds, but at a lower quality. Both versions were heavily censored. Samurai Shodown also showed up on the Neo Geo CD, Game Boy, Game Gear, Sega CD, Saturn, 3DO, and FM Towns. It hit the PlayStation along with its sequel Samurai Shodown 2, and was in SNK Arcade Classics Volume 1 for PS2, PSP, and Wii. Oddly enough, the PS2 and PSP versions of that don't play as well as the one for the Wii. The version for Virtual Console is ostensibly based on the original Neo Geo release, but still has some slight censorship. That's a lot of ports, but unfortunately, after that, each sequel get less and less ports. Samurai Shodown 2 was better and more popular than the original, but it didn't get as many ports. It showed up on the Neo Geo CD, but skipped the 16-bit consoles altogether. It eventually showed up on the PlayStation, as I mentioned in the double pack with the first game, though that was only in Japan. There was a PC version, which was a lot like the Neo Geo CD version, and was eventually released for Xbox Live Arcade, Wii Virtual Console, and PlayStation Network, though the PSN version was only in Japan. Samurai Shodown 3 Blades of Blood fared slightly better in terms of ports, as aside from the Neo Geo and Neo Geo CD versions, it also showed up on the Saturn, PlayStation, and oddly enough, the Game Boy. I find that interesting because the original was also on Game Boy, but Part 2 was not. Unfortunately, in this case, the home ports are really lacking. The Game Boy version is obviously insanely toned down. The PlayStation one just sucks. And while the Saturn version is good, it requires the RAM cartridge to play, which can be a bitch to get a hold of. Samurai Shodown 4 Amakusa's Revenge is where I lost track of the series back in the 1990s, as 3 was the last one that I played for Neo Geo. It was released the same year as 3 and is considered a better game, as many consider 3 to be a sort of black sheep in the series. Like its predecessor, it was released for Neo Geo CD, PlayStation, and Saturn, the Saturn version being better than the PlayStation version, but needing the RAM pack. The PlayStation version did add a character and was called Samurai Shodown 4 Special. Samurai Shodown 5 came out 7 years later. I guess the series had to take a break. It's considered a prequel to the series, and in Japan is called Part 0. It was also not developed by SNK, as this was in 2003 after SNK had gone bankrupt, so Samurai Shodown was handed over to Yuki Enterprises. This version was released only for Neo Geo, PlayStation 2, and Xbox. The PS2 version came out only in Japan and Europe, though we did get the Xbox version, which was published by SNK Playmore. There was later an update to the game called Samurai Shodown 5 Special, which was exclusive to the Neo Geo, with no ports being released. This version included a load of additional characters and a load of additional violence. Samurai Shodown 6 was the first in the series to not be released on the Neo Geo, as the aging MVS hardware just wasn't going to hack it anymore, so it was released for the regular arcade machines. Unfortunately, there was no home ports at the time, and the arcade version was released only in Japan. Thankfully, there is a collection, Samurai Shodown Anthology for the Wii, PlayStation 2, and PlayStation Portable. This contains Samurai Shodown 1 through 6, all in their original Neo Geo, or in the case of 6, arcade glory. It is oddly missing Samurai Shodown 5 Special, though, even though I swear it was originally advertised as being part of the game. Samurai Shodown has a few spin-offs, and I want to run through them very quickly so we can get to the main event. There were 2 3D fighting games released for the Hyper Neo Geo 64, entitled Samurai Shodown 64 and Samurai Shodown 64 Warrior's Rage. Neither of these ever received any home ports, though a game called Samurai Shodown Warrior's Rage showed up on the PlayStation. This was not a port of the second spin-off, but rather a third spin-off of its own. This version is also available for the PSN in Japan. There was also Samurai Shodown RPG, which is, well, an RPG based on the series, which was released for Neo Geo CD, PlayStation, and Saturn, but never in America. Finally, and most recently, is Samurai Shodown Sen for arcade and Xbox 360, though that one is usually considered to be pretty bad. So let's move on to the main event, which includes Fatal Fury, Art of Fighting, and the King of Fighters. Let's start with Fatal Fury. In Japan, Fatal Fury is known as the Legend of the Hungry Wolf. That Hungry Wolf referring to the series' main character, Terry Bogard. Interestingly enough, the original game was released here as Fatal Fury, the King of Fighters, sort of foreshadowing. The series is known for its plane system, in which there are two horizontal planes to switch to during battle, though not every game in the series uses this. The series in general is known for it. The series is also sort of broken down into two separate series and then a final game to cap the entire thing off. The original series is the regular Fatal Fury series, and the second one is the Real Bout series. The original game had a total of 3 characters to play as, Terry, Andy, and Joe, but lots of other characters to fight against, accumulating in the big baddie, Geese Howard, who has become a huge villain in the SNK universe. Obviously it was released for the Neo Geo. For home ports you can get it for Neo Geo CD, Super NES, and Genesis. There was also a version for the X68000, in Japan only of course. The home versions were much cooler, however, as you could play as every character for 2-player mode, though the Genesis one is missing 2 characters. The game also showed up eventually on the Wii's Virtual Console. Fatal Fury 2 is even better, with more playable characters and more fleshed out story, which this time revolves around a tournament called the King of Fighters. So, in a way, Fatal Fury is the original King of Fighters, as it used the name as a subtitle, and in another way, Fatal Fury 2 is the original King of Fighters, as it takes place in the first King of Fighters tournament. Fatal Fury 2 showed up on the same systems, the Neo Geo CD, Genesis, Super NES, and X68000, though this time there was also a Game Boy version. It also showed up on the Wii's Virtual Console. The next release was more of an update to Fatal Fury 2. It was called Fatal Fury Special, and adds few characters and moves. It's faster and has some new gameplay elements, but it's pretty much an updated version of Fatal Fury 2. It does have some characters that don't make sense plot-wise, so it's considered a dream match game, without having a cohesive story. Another preamble to the King of Fighters games. This one showed up all over the place for home ports, the Neo Geo CD, FM Town, Sega CD, Super NES, Turbo Duo, X68000, and Game Gear, oddly enough. It later showed up on the Wii's Virtual Console and Xbox Live Arcade. The last game in the original series was Fatal Fury 3 Road to the Final Victory. This game featured an all-new graphic style, faster gameplay, new strategic elements, and even finishing moves. And now there are 3 planes to play on, although the system for moving between them is drastically different. For home ports, this showed up on Neo Geo CD, Saturn, and PC, making it the most pain-in-the-ass one to get. It did later show up on the Wii's Virtual Console. The next series began with Real Bout Fatal Fury, which contains even more new characters, a better and easier approach to plane switching, and overall tighter control. Real Bout Fatal Fury's home versions include the Neo Geo CD, PlayStation, and Saturn, and in Japan it later showed up on PSN. The follow-up is a bit confusing. It's Real Bout Fatal Fury Special. But while Fatal Fury Special was an update to Fatal Fury 2, Real Bout Fatal Fury Special is more of a sequel, with a new art style and enough changes to gameplay to basically be a new game. This one showed up for home ports on the Neo Geo CD, Saturn, and Game Boy, and like the first one, it got an eventual release for the PSN. The next one is odd because it's obscure and almost isn't official. It's called Real Bout Special Dominated Mind and was never released for Neo Geo, instead being exclusive to the PlayStation and to Japan. Wikipedia doesn't even mention its existence. Basically, it's the lost PlayStation version of Real Bout Fatal Fury Special, but is trimmed in a way to keep the gameplay good while getting around the limitations of the PlayStation. It doesn't have plane switching and some characters are missing, but there is one new character who had not yet appeared in any Fatal Fury game and would officially be revealed in the next game. And the gameplay was actually quite good, and with heavy emphasis on anime cutscenes. The next official one was Real Bout Fatal Fury Special 2, The Newcomers. This one was pretty much just like Real Bout Special, but with new characters and a few tweaks. Real Bout 2's home versions include the Neo Geo CD and Neo Geo Pocket Color. Yep, that's it. The very last Fatal Fury game, which capped off the series, was Fatal Fury Mark of the Wolves. This is also considered to be the very best one, and often compared to Street Fighter III for its tight controls, great animation, and strategic and deep gameplay. Unfortunately, pickings are slim for home ports. You can get it for the Dreamcast, but good luck, it's insanely rare. It was released for PlayStation 2, but only in Japan. Thankfully, it eventually came out for Xbox Live Arcade. There were some scant spin-offs. First was Fatal Fury First Contact, which was an exclusive game for Neo Geo Pocket Color, pretty much what you'd expect. And lastly, the series went 3D with Fatal Fury Wild Ambition for the Hyper Neo Geo 64 and PlayStation, which acts as a sort of remake of the very first Fatal Fury. For collections, there's actually two of them, both for PlayStation 2. Fatal Fury Battle Archives Volume 1 contains Fatal Fury 2, Fatal Fury Special, and Fatal Fury 3. Fatal Fury Battle Archives Volume 2 contains Real Bout Fatal Fury, Real Bout Fatal Fury Special, and Real Bout Fatal Fury 2, The Newcomers. Now, the King of Fighters thing, as I mentioned, sort of began with the first Fatal Fury and the introduction of the King of Fighters tournament, though another beginning is Fatal Fury Special, which added the character Ryo Sakazaki to the mix. Ryo was one of the stars of Art of Fighting, so let's talk about those. There are only 3 of these. In Japan, they're called Fist of Dragon and Tiger. They tend to be way more story-based, with usually a limited amount of playable characters and a linear progression, sort of like the first Fatal Fury. The series is known for its graphics, with big detailed sprites, visible damage when the characters get hit multiple times, and scaling. I have fond memories of the original for MVS, though once again the home ports are a mess and not that good. The original Art of Fighting had 2 playable characters, Ryo and Robert, and in a lot of ways was considered a huge Street Fighter knockoff. So much so that Capcom created the Dan Hibiki character to make fun of the situation. Basically, if you take Robert's head and put it on Ryo's body, you have Dan. Anyway, it's got the typical Neo Geo CD port and the typical crappy Super NES and Genesis ports, as well as a Japanese port for Turbo Duo, and the original showed up on the Wii Virtual Console. Art of Fighting 2 was an improvement with more characters to play as, and it introduced Geese Howard, a character from Fatal Fury, showing again that these two take place in the same universe. Unfortunately, unless you had a Neo Geo CD, you pretty much want to stick with the original Neo Geo version, or spend a huge amount of money for the AES one, as the only other port was for the Super NES, and to say it sucked is a huge understatement. Thankfully, it showed up on the Wii Virtual Console much later. The third game is Art of Fighting 3, The Path of the Warrior, which is more of a side story and plays really differently than the first two, and other than Ryo and Robert, it has a totally new cast of characters. Unfortunately, the only home versions were the Neo Geo and Neo Geo CD versions. Thankfully, there is a collection, however, Art of Fighting Anthology for PlayStation 2, which has all 3 games. So this brings us to the King of Fighters. The King of Fighters is interesting because it uses teams of 3. In some games, there's set teams, and in some others you get to make up your own team. Almost all the characters are from previous SNK games, though there are many who are original characters. So the main event, folks, let's go through the King of Fighters series. First up, the original game that started it all, the King of Fighters 94. Now, it's not the 94th game, just that it was released in 1994, and for quite a long time, these came out annually. The game's lineup was made up of 8 teams of 3 characters each, from different countries. The Japanese team consisted of 3 original characters, Kyo, Benimaru, and Goro, with Kyo being the default main character of the series. The Italian team had the 3 original Fatal Fury characters, Terry, Andy, and Joe. The Brazilian team was made up of characters from the shooter games Ikari Warriors, Clark and Ralph, and a new character named Haydn. The British team featured all women, King and Yuri from Art of Fighting, and Mai from Fatal Fury. The Mexican team had characters from Art of Fighting, Ryo, Robert, and Takuma. The Korean team featured Kim from Fatal Fury and 2 new characters, Choi and Chang. The Chinese team featured characters from the game Psycho Soldier, Sai and Athena, who had also appeared in her own arcade and NES platforming game, and a new character named Chin. The American team had all new characters, Heavy D, Lucky, and Brian. The game also introduced Rugal, a recurring villain of the series and the last boss of the game. The game was released for Neo Geo, Neo Geo CD, and eventually the Wii Virtual Console and PSN. 10 years later, for the game's anniversary, SNK released the King of Fighters 94 Rebound, an enhanced remake of the game. This version was exclusive to the PlayStation 2. The next year, the King of Fighters 95 was released. This is also the first to have a deeper story rather than being a Dreambout game. The game had teams, but you could also make up your own team using the Team Edit feature. This one had 8 teams as well, though the configuration was different. It was not based on countries. For example, the Japanese team of Kyo, Benimaru, and Goro returned, though now they're called the Hero Team. The Fatal Fury team is Terry, Andy, and Joe. The Art of Fighting team is Ryo, Robert, and Takuma. The Ikari Warriors team is Haidem, Ralph, and Clark. The Psycho Soldier team is Athena, Sai, and Chin. The women's team is King, Yuri, and Mai. The Korean team is Kim, Chang, and Choi, and the new Rivals team consists of Billy Kane from Fatal Fury, Aiji from Art of Fighting, and a new character, Iori, who is the rival of Kyo and recurring villain. There is also a new sub-boss, Saisyu. King of Fighters 95 was released for Neo Geo, Neo Geo CD, PlayStation, Saturn, and Game Boy, with the Game Boy version also including Nakoruru, a character from Samurai Shodown. It later showed up on Wii Virtual Console and PSN, though the PSN version was only in Japan. The King of Fighters 96 expands things further, with 9 teams now. The Hero Team, Fatal Fury Team, Art of Fighting Team, Psycho Soldier Team, and Korea Team are unchanged. The Ikari Team swaps Haidem out for another new character, Leona. The Women Team gets shaken up also, as Yuri was replaced with Kasumi from Art of Fighting 2. The Rival Team is replaced by the Yagami Team, which still includes Iori, but also 2 new characters, Mature and Vice. The game also has a boss team, including Geese Howard from Fatal Fury, Wolfgang Krauser from Fatal Fury, and Mr. Big from Art of Fighting. And the game itself has 2 new bosses, Chizuru Kagura and Leopold Gonitz. The game is released for Neo Geo, Neo Geo CD, Saturn, PlayStation, and Game Boy. The Game Boy version having a few exclusives such as Mr. Karate from Art of Fighting, alternative versions of Iori and Leona, and Maki Kagura, a brand new character. The game would later show up on the Wii Virtual Console and PSN. The King of Fighters 97 wraps up the story of the Orochi Saga. This game has 10 playable teams. The Hero Team returns, though it's back to being called the Japan Team. The Fatal Fury Team, Art of Fighting Team, Ikari Warriors Team, Psycho Soldier Team, and Korea Team are unchanged from the last game. The Women Team now has swapped out Yuri for Chizuru, and there's the New Faces Team, which introduces 3 new characters, Yashiro, Shermie, and Chris. There's also a special team made up of Billy Kane, Blue Mary, and Yamazaki from Fatal Fury. Iori is still selectable as a single character for Team Edit, as well as a new character named Shinjo. Boss characters include upgraded versions of Iori, Leona, Yashiro, Shermie, and Chris, and the final boss was Orochi, a new character that had pretty much been the main villain of the series so far, influencing everything from behind the scenes. The King of Fighters 97 was released for Neo Geo, Neo Geo CD, Saturn, and PlayStation, and it also showed up on both the Wii Virtual Console and PSN. The King of Fighters 98 was another dream match game, without any sort of storyline. It's also considered one of the best games by many and long-time fans of the series, and is most known for its selectable fighting styles. The roster was expanded to 12 teams. The Japan team is back to being called the Hero Team and has the same lineup. The Fatal Fury, Ikari Team, Korea Team, Special Team, Art of Fighting Team, Women Team, and Psycho Soldier Team are all the same. The Art of Fighting Team swaps out Takuma for Yuri. The old New Faces team returns, only now it's called the Orochi Team. The Yagami Team from King of Fighters 96 returns. The Oyaji Team is made up out of fathers, Haidem, Takuma, and Saisyu. And the original American team from King of Fighters 94 returns as the American Sports Team. There are also 2 single-entry characters, Rugal and Shinjo, and a pumped-up version of Rugal acted as the boss. They were hidden characters which were alternate versions of existing ones. The home ports include Neo Geo CD, PlayStation, Dreamcast, and PlayStation 2. It also eventually showed up on PSN and Xbox Live Arcade. To add unnecessary confusion for no particular reason, the Dreamcast version was called the King of Fighters Dream Match 1999, not to be confused with the King of Fighters 99, which was the next game in the series. The King of Fighters 98 also got a remake, the King of Fighters 98 Ultimate Match, which added in characters from the first 4 games that were not included in the original. This version was released for arcade, PlayStation 2, and eventually Xbox Live Arcade. The next game actually has a subtitle, The King of Fighters 99 Millennium Battle. This one also continued the story and changed up the gameplay. Rather than teams having 3 characters, they now had 4 characters. The 4th character, chosen in your order, being the Striker character, who could be summoned a few times during battle to perform a move, and the selectable fighting styles from King of Fighters 98 were gone, only to be replaced by some new features. As there were more characters and teams, there were now only 7 teams, and oddly enough, the game's main character, Kyo, is not to be found in any of them. The Hero team instead introduces a new character to be the hero for the Nest storyline, K-, who is, to be fair, a lot like Kyo. He is joined by Benimaru and Shinjo, as well as a new character, Maxima. The Fatal Fury team adds Mai as the 4th character. The Art of Fighting team basically consolidates the most popular versions to have both Yuri and Takuma, along with Ryo and Robert. The Psycho Soldier team adds a new character named Bao. The Akari Warriors team adds a new character named Whip. The women's team includes King, Blue Mary, Kasumi, and Lee from Fatal Fury. The Korea team adds Jun-hoon, another new character. The single-entry characters are 2 clones of Kyo named Kyo 1 and Kyo 2, and the original Kyo and his rival Iori are available as hidden characters. The end boss was a brand new character, Chrysalid. King of Fighters 99's home ports includes the Neo Geo CD, PlayStation, and Dreamcast, and it eventually showed up on PSN. The Dreamcast version is actually a bit of a remake, which handled the strikers differently and added some characters: Chizuru, Alfred from Fatal Fury, Fiolina from Metal Slug, and Gai Tendo from an obscure 3D fighting game called Baruki 1. There was also 3 brand new characters, Sio, Vanessa, and Seth. Make sure not to confuse the Dreamcast version, called the King of Fighters 99 Evolution, with the Dreamcast version of the previous game, the King of Fighters Dream Match 1999. The next game, the King of Fighters 2000, expands greatly on the striker system, basically taking it much further and removing many of the limitations on strikers, and basically giving each character their own striker. So in addition to the 4 characters in each team, with the 4th acting as a striker, each character had their own individual striker to use. Yeah, it gets confusing, but it's pretty fun. Usually the alternate strikers are characters from previous King of Fighters games, or alternate versions of the characters. The Hero team now includes K-, Maxima, Vanessa, and a new character, Ramon. The respective strikers were a new character called Another K-, Rocky from the game Robo Army, Fiolina, and Duke from Burning Fight. The Benimaru team obviously includes Benimaru, along with Shinjo, Seth, and a new character named Lin. The respective strikers were Another Benimaru, obviously a new entry, cosplayer Kyoko, who's a girl who dresses like Kyo, Goro, and Aiji. The Fatal Fury team is Terry, Andy, Joe, and Blue Mary, with the respective strikers being Geese, Billy Kane, Duck King from Fatal Fury, and Yamazaki. The Art of Fighting team now contains Ryo, Robert, King, and Takuma, with the respective strikers being Cade from The Last Blade, Another Robert, King Lion from Savage Rain, and Guy. The Akari Warriors team is Leona, Ralph, Clark, and Whip, with the respective strikers being Gonitz, Yashiro, Shermie, and Chris. The Psycho Soldiers team is Athena, Sai, Chin, and Bao, with the respective strikers being an alternate Athena, an alternate Sai, a new character named Baitang, and a new character named Karu, though she had appeared previously as a background character. The Korea team is Kim, Chang, Choi, and Jun, with the respective strikers being Kim Soo-2 from the game Kizuna Encounter, Kim Jae-hoon and Kim Dong-hwan from Fatal Fury, and a new character, Kang. The women team is Mai, Yuri, Kasumi, and a new character, Hinako. The respective strikers were Chizuru, Nakaruru from Samurai Showdown, Lee, and a new character, Lily Kane. Single-entry characters include Kyo and his striker Seo, and Yuri and his strikers Mature and Vice. There was also a hidden character, a newbie named Kula Diamond, and her strikers Candy Diamond and Foxy. The end boss was a character named Zero. On top of that all, there were additional strikers called Manic Strikers made up of the SNK mascot G-Mantle, Saisyu, Regal, another Iori, Smart Chang, Cool Choi, a new character named Unknown, who bears a striking resemblance to Todo, a pair of mascots called Neo and Geo, and a bunch of manic strikers that were only in the home ports. Haydem, Heavy D, Lucky, Brian, Mr. Big, Wolfgang Krauser, Orochi, Wild Iori, Wild Leona, and Chrysalid. Phew. Speaking of the home ports, this one made it to the Dreamcast, PlayStation 2, and PC, though the PC version was a run on a Neo Geo emulator as a part of the GameTap service. The King of Fighters 2001 considerably toned down the Strikers stuff, this time with just 4 character teams, along with the choice to pick as many characters as you'd like as playable or Strikers. So you could play as 1 character with 3 Strikers or 3 with 1 Striker. The roster was expanded to 11 teams. The Hero team now has K-Dash, Maxima, Whip, and Lin. The Japan team returns with Kyo, Benimaru, Goro, and Shinjo. The Iori team debuts with Iori, Vanessa, Seth, and Raymond. The Fatal Fury team now has Terry, Andy, Joe, and Blue Mary. The Art of Fighting team is the same. The Ikari Warriors team is the same. The Psycho Soldiers team is the same. The Women team is the same. The Nests team has Kula Diamond, 2 new characters called K49 and Angel, and Foxy. The Korea team has Kim, Chang, Choi, and Mei Lee, who was new. The Zero team is made up out of bosses, Zero, Chrysalid, and 2 new ones, Ron and Glaugen. The game also intros a new end boss, Ignis. For home ports, the game only came to 2 systems, the Dreamcast and the PlayStation 2. The King of Fighters 2002 is something of a return to form as it got rid of the Strikers completely and returned to the old school teams of 3 people, though it adds some new features such as the Max features. There are now 13 teams, made up of returning to classic lineups. The Japan team is once again Kyo, Benimaru, and Goro. The Fatal Fury team is once again Terry, Andy, and Joe. The Art of Fighting team is Ryo, Robert, and Takuma. The Ikari Warriors team is Leona, Ralph, and Clark. The Psycho Soldiers team is Athena, Sai, and Shin. The Women team is Mai, Yuri, and Mei Lee. And the Korea team is back to being Kim, Chang, and Choi. The remaining teams are named after previous releases. The King of Fighters 96 team is Iori, Machuria, and Vice. The King of Fighters 97 team is Blue Mary, Billy Kane, and Yamazaki. The King of Fighters 98 team is Yashiro, Shermie, and Chris. The King of Fighters 99 team is K-Dash, Maximo, and Whip. And the King of Fighters 2000 team is Vanessa, Ramon, and Seth. And the King of Fighters 2001 team is Kula Diamond, Angel, and K49. There is also an Orochi team made up out of Orochi versions of Yashiro, Shermie, and Chris, and the last boss is Omega Rugal. An alternate version of Kyo appears as a boss as well. Because the game's return to its roots and classic characters and teams, it was the first King of Fighters game to not include any new characters. The game was ported to Dreamcast, PlayStation 2, and Xbox. The Dreamcast version added a few extra characters, Shinjo and King, while the PlayStation 2 and Xbox versions also add Geese, Goenitz, and Orochi Iori. The King of Fighters 2002 got a remake called The King of Fighters 2002 Unlimited Match, which was exclusive to PlayStation 2. It was never released for Neo Geo. The teams are shaken up, but I'm not going to go into that because it's all the same characters from the original. There was also new graphics, balances to gameplay, and even some new moves. It also introduced several characters, including Nameless, a new character, Foxy, Hanaku, Lin, Junhoon, Lee, Bao, Kyo 1 and Kyo 2, Kasumi, and Haydem, as well as bosses Chrysalid, Ignis, and 2 versions of Zero. There was also secret characters added, which are alternate versions of Sai, Takuma, Robert, Goenitz, and Geese. The King of Fighters 2003 is interesting for a few reasons. Firstly, it was the last main game in the series to be released for the Neo Geo, and secondly, because the new gameplay elements, which allowed for switching characters in the middle of battle and designating a team leader who would have additional powers. Also, now that the Nest Saga was done, a new storyline was beginning, the Ash Crimson Saga. There are now 9 teams, definitely a subdued lineup from the previous game. The Hero team introduces 3 brand new characters, Ash Crimson, Dual Lon, and Shen Wu. The Fatal Fury team is Terry and Joe, but ditches Andy for T-Zok. The Art of Fighting team swaps out Takuma for Yuri. Seems these two just keep taking turns. The Ikari Warriors team is the same. The Korea team swaps out Choi for Jun. The Women Fighters team is now King, Mai, and Blue Mary. The Japan team swaps out Kyo for Shinjo, and there are 2 new teams. The Outlaw team is Billy Kane, Yamazaki, and Geto from Fatal Fury. And the High School Girls team is Athena, Hinako, and a new character named Malin. The K- team is also there with K-, Maxima, and Whip. You could also select Kyo and Iori, and bosses include Kusanagi, Chizuru, Maki, who is a former background character making her debut, a new character named Adelheid, and another new character named Mukai. Home versions of the game came out for PlayStation 2 and Xbox. King of Fighters 2003 was also the last game in the series to be released on an annual schedule. At this point, the series would no longer be released annually, so it no longer made sense to name each game after the year in which it was released. So the next game did not hit the arcades until 2005. It would have been a mistake to name it the King of Fighters 2005, as it would seem like a gap in the series took place. There was no King of Fighters 2004, so since it was the 11th release, the game was released as the King of Fighters 11. As the Neo Geo is now too old to handle the type of game SNK wanted to create, the new game was released with custom arcade hardware. The game features an evolution of many of the features from King of Fighters 2003, as well as a feature in which in the event that time runs out, the winner is not determined by who has the most life, but rather by who played better. This also affects how the game plays, as more skill and variation actually powers your characters up. There are 11 teams in King of Fighters 11. The hero team has Ash Crimson, Shenwu, and a new character named Oswald. The Fatal Fury team is now made up of Terry, Kim, and Duck King. The Art of Fighting team is Ryo, Yuri, and King. The Ikari Warriors team is now Ralph, Clark, and Whip. The Neo Cycle Soldiers team is Athena, Sai, and a new character named Momoko. The Kyo and Yuri team has, well, try and guess, Shinjo is also there. The K- team has K-, Maxima, and Whip, and the Agent team is Vanessa, Ramon, and Blue Mary. The Mark of the Wolves team has Geto and Tizak, as well as Bon, making her King of Fighters debut from Fatal Fury. The Anti-Art of Fighting team now has Malin, Kasumi, and Aiji, and the Rivals team has Benimaru, Duolon, and a new character, Elizabeth. Bosses include Guy, Sho from Savage Rain, Jiazu from the Kazuna Encounter, Silber from Baruki 1, Adelheid, a new character named Shion, and the last boss was a new character named Magaki. Oh, how I hate Magaki. That bastard probably caused more thrown controllers than any other last boss in a fighting game ever. This time the only home version of the game was for PlayStation 2, and the game can actually be a bit of a bitch to find in the wild, but I have to highly recommend you look for it. The next game, the King of Fighters 12 Rebirth, wouldn't hit until 2009, and boy was it a letdown. Firstly, the arcade version was only released in Japan. Secondly, the game is a dream match game that did not continue the Ash Crimson saga. Worst of all, the game features no teams, no bosses. Rather, you just pick 3 characters to make a team out of the very limited lineup of 20 characters, fight a few other teams until the game just ends. The graphics and animations were amazing, but there were only a few backgrounds with no story, no bosses, no ending, and nothing to unlock. There was no reason to play it other than multiplayer. Like I said, there were no teams, just a loose mix of 20 characters, which were Kyo, Iori, Goro, Terry, Andy, Joe, Kim, Ryo, Robert, Athena, Sai, Chin, Ralph, Clark, Leona, Ash Crimson, Shenwu, Raiden, Benimaru, and Duolon. Other than the fact that Raiden, who was from Fatal Fury, had not appeared in a King of Fighters game, there was also no new characters. The home versions for Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 added 2 additional characters, Elizabeth and Mature, but really, no big deal. As much as 12 was a letdown, the next and so far newest game in the series, the King of Fighters 13, was a huge return to form. Featuring new graphics and animation from the previous game, but with an actual story, teams, bosses, and fun, the game more than made up for the previous weak effort, though unfortunately the arcade version was still exclusive to Japan. There were 10 teams this time. The Elizabeth team has, well, Elizabeth, along with Shenwu and Duolon. The Japan team has Kyo, Benimaru, and Goro. The Yagami team returns with Iori, Mature, and Vice. The Fatal Fury team returns to the classic lineup of Terry, Andy, and Joe. The Kim team now has Kim, Raiden, and Huajai from Fatal Fury, making his King of Fighters debut. The Psycho Soldier team returns to the classic lineup of Athena, Sai, and Chin. The Art of Fighting team has Ryo, Robert, and Takuma. The Ikari Warriors team returns to the classic lineup of Ralph, Clark, and Leona. The Women team is Mai, Yuri, and King, and the K- team has K-, Kula Diamond, and Maxima. Ash Crimson is available as a single-entry character and also appears as a boss, followed by a new boss named Saiki, who reminded me strongly of Magaki, but thankfully he wasn't a huge asshole like Magaki was. An evil version of Ash Crimson appeared as the final boss. The home version of the game for Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 added Billy Kane and a playable version of Saiki to the mix, and there have so far been 3 characters available as DLC, including alternate versions of Iori and Kyo, and Mr. Karate, who had not appeared in a King of Fighters game other than the Game Boy version of King of Fighters 96. King of Fighters 13 was also the first game in the series to be released for mobile phones, as versions are made available for Android and iOS. The iOS version is simply called The King of Fighters I. Well, all in all, the series doesn't seem too confusing, even with the switch between years and actual numbers, but there are spin-offs, and this is where things can get mixed up. The first I'd like to mention is the King of Fighters Neo Wave. This one hit arcades in 2004, making it the logical next game in the series after the King of Fighters 2003. As a matter of fact, when it came out, we all assumed it was the next game and wondered why it wasn't simply called the King of Fighters 2004. And it wasn't until the release of King of Fighters 11 that we realized that they didn't count this as part of the series. It's a fairly standard King of Fighters game with teams, many characters, new systems. Sure, it's a dream match game with no story, but there are many of the games in the series. I remember playing the hell out of the arcade version, simply thinking of it as the new King of Fighters game, and it was slightly annoyed when the machine finally got hauled away. To make matters worse, there wasn't a home version for another 2 years. The game was released for PlayStation 2 and Xbox, but the PlayStation 2 version was kept out of America due to a stupid policy by Sony that does not allow straight ports of 2D games on their systems to be released in America. The same thing that kept us from getting the PSP version of Breath of Fire 3. Well, at least the PSP is region-free. No such luck with the PS2. The Xbox version was released here, but I didn't have the original Xbox, and the game itself is rather rare anyway. Oh well. The King of Fighters Maximum Impact was SNK's attempt at making a 3D version of the series, kind of like Samurai Shodown 64. There was never a Neo Geo or arcade version. Instead, the game was released directly for PlayStation 2 and Xbox. That's not too confusing, but the sequel is a mess. The King of Fighters Maximum Impact 2 was pretty much more of the same, another 3D version of the game, this time released only for PlayStation 2, but for whatever reason, even though it's clearly a sequel to a game popular enough to garner one, the American version changed the name to The King of Fighters 2006, even though this confuses it with the main series, which by then had given up on naming them after years. This game got 2 updates. The first was the King of Fighters Maximum Impact Regulation A, which was released only in Japan, and was actually an arcade game, bringing the 3D home console spin-offs home to arcades. The King of Fighters Maximum Impact Regulation A2 was also released for arcades way later in 2008, but only in Japan, and a proposed PlayStation 2 version was cancelled. Like Samurai Showdown, King of Fighters got its own RPG, the King of Fighters Kyo for PlayStation and later on PSP, and it takes place between King of Fighters 96 and 97. Unfortunately, it was only released in Japan. The King of Fighters EX Neo Blood is an original King of Fighters game for Game Boy Advance, though it's based heavily enough on King of Fighters 99 that some confuse it for a port. It got a sequel, the King of Fighters EX2 Howling Blood, which was also released for Game Boy Advance and also showed up on the dreaded Electric Taco itself, the N-Gage. There's a board game type thing for the Neo Geo Pocket Color called the King of Fighters Battle de Paradise. Obviously that one stayed in Japan. The spin-offs even extended to a shmup based on King of Fighters. That's right, a friggin' shmup. That's a shoot-'em-up for those not in the know. It was called KOF Sky Stage. It was released in Japan for arcade, and eventually it came to Xbox Live Arcade. And yes, there's even an MMO, although it's one of those Korean MMOs that you probably don't want to play, since they're designed to take hours upon hours of your life for any mundane task. I honestly don't have much info on it other than its title, The King of Fighters Online. As far as collections of King of Fighters goes, it can be pretty damn depressing, as there's no way to collect the entire series without having to get individual games. The King of Fighters Orochi collection for PlayStation 2 only came out in Japan. It includes the Orochi Saga games, King of Fighters 95, 96, and 97. The Nests collection, also released in PS2 in Japan, contained King of Fighters 99, 2000, and 2001. So even with both of these, you'd be missing King of Fighters 98. Plus, those only came out in Japan. There is, however, another compilation that we did get, which is oddly also called The King of Fighters, the Orochi Saga. This one came out for PlayStation 2, PSP, and Wii, and has King of Fighters 94, 95, 96, 97, and 98. But there isn't a way to collect 99 and beyond in America. So, well, that's it. That's all there is to know about the main SNK fighting series. Samurai Showdown, Art of Fighting, Fatal Fury, World Heroes, and of course the big one, The King of Fighters. Join me next week and we're going to tone it down quite a lot and examine one of the biggest mysteries of the Nintendo 64 era.